Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome to tonight's Twitter Space session on the topic of cyber confidence building measures between India and Pakistan, being held from the podium of Center for International Strategic Studies AJK. The Center for International Strategic Studies, Azad Jammu and Kashmir, is a nascent and a first of its nature think tank in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. It is an autonomous, non-profit, non-partisan and multidisciplinary research institution. It aspires to achieve academic excellence in the field of strategic studies with special focus on Azad Jammu and Kashmir. I am Rimsha Malik, an Associate Research Officer at Center for International Strategic Studies, AJK. I will be moderating this session. Today from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m., we will have the privilege of hosting an esteemed guest speaker, Fahad Nabil, who is a distinguished lecturer at the National Defense University, Islamabad. We will delve into the intricacies of cyber CBMs, paving the way for a safer digital space between two nations. Without further taking my time, I would like to invite Fahad Nabil to speak. Over to you, sir.
Hello, hopes I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Fine. Rimshak, I guess I was not able to listen to your remaining part of your introduction.
So I'm saying without further taking any time, I would like to invite you to speak. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Ramsha, and thank you, CISS AJK, for giving me an opportunity to share my opinion on this topic of how cyber conflict building measures between India and Pakistan can be conceptualized and what are the challenges in order to formalize them into a proper in a structured way. I would just start my discussion by just giving a quick definition of what is confidence building measures. They are generally practices and actions which are undertaken by hostile actors which are in a state of conflict or are approaching conflict, so that they take these measures in order to build shared trust or reduce hostilities between them. So, in case of Pakistan and India, there are a number of confidence building measures which both countries have been practicing for quite some time. But when it comes to cyber domain, not a single confidence building measure have been agreed upon, although scholars and experts have from time to time have proposed at least 14 confidence building measures which they believe can be applied in the cyber domain between both the countries. However, given the nature of bilateral relationship between both countries, any progress or achievement in this regard in the near future is not expected. And there are multiple reasons when we look upon other examples of other countries like US and China, which agreed upon such confidence building measure in 2015. So again, there are two key factors which are very important in order to create this environment in which such confidence building measures can be formalized. The first is to have this geostrategic environment in which both countries can have this trust wherein they can have this understanding that they should reach to certain confidence building measures in order to build trust and reduce the nature of hostilities among themselves. In case of US and China in 2015, the President Obama and President Xi Jinping agreed upon the fact that both countries should cooperate on cyber crimes and share information among their relevant institutions. And moreover, they also agreed that no country should be participating in any cyber attacks on each other which might result in theft of intellectual property, because that was an issue which was very important at that time for Americans. So again, both countries agreed upon these measures, and over the passage of time in 2015, towards the ending part of 2015, we see a visible decrease where Chinese entities were not uh, carrying out cyber attacks in order to steal intellectual property of American firms. So there was this visible decrease in such activities because of the agreed upon confidence building measure between USA and China. But when it comes to Pakistan and India, the geopolitical environment between both countries have not been such where they can agree upon such measures. So again, the geopolitical environment is very important, and geopolitical environment and the sincerity to hold such discussion for confidence building measures can be an important enabling environment through after which only both countries can sit down and have this conversation as to which confidence building measures can be applied or not. That's it from the opening remarks. Rimsha, if you would like to ask a question, or should I continue my discussion?
Thank you, sir, for shedding light on the significance of cyber CBMs. Now let's open the floor for questions. Please feel free to ask questions and we will get to you shortly. Thank you. Yes, sir. Please ask. If there is any question, please feel free to ask questions from Mr. Nabil.
Kindly continue your lecture. Question answer session will be entertained at the end of this.
Oh, okay, Shahzad. So prior to earlier, I was discussing as to example of how China and USA was able to agree upon certain confidence building measures in the cyber domain, and there was a visible decrease in the later part of 2015 when Chinese entities were not actively involved in pursuing intellectual property of American firms. So this is one of the good examples of where countries which have certain animosities among themselves were able to come and reach to certain conclusions. And currently, if we look upon the cyber confidence building measures all across the world, the efforts have been started since 1998. Russia was the first country which tabled this resolution at the United Nations in order to have this discussion on what should be the acceptable responsible state behavior in the cyber domain. And from there onwards, in 2004, the first group of governmental experts was created in order to understand how a responsible state behavior should be in the state, in the cyberspace. Again, the group of governmental experts is a group which is formulated by, in cyber domain scenario, it is created by the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, and again, it is structured in a way which should have a regional balance, as well as it looks upon the expertise of the experts who are to be part of this group. And again, over the passage of 2004 onwards, there have been 6 open group of government experts which have discussed upon themselves as to what should be the basic parameter of a responsible state behavior in the cyber domain, and they have their own varying degrees of differences among themselves. Again, the first was as I said earlier, was something which was formalized in 2004. Again, it was based on the 2002 resolution tabled by Russia, which was of this particular interest that they want that countries should discuss what should be acceptable behavior in the cyber domain. Again, the first, as part of this group of government experts, it is important that there should be a consensus report at the end of these interactions. So there should be a unanimous opinion of all participants of such initiatives. So again, no consensus was able to reach and no consensus report was able to emerge after 2004 initiative, because primarily one of the reasons was that permanent members of the United Nations Security Council were not in synchronized with what should be the direction of the overall report. So that was the reason why they were not able to come up with a consensus report. And if we look upon the cyber-related discussions overall, we continue to see that permanent members of the United Nations Security Council have been an obstacle in order to, when it comes to the international development in in the cyberspace. These 5 countries have been an obstacle in the further development of how countries view the applicability of international law in the cyber domain. Despite the effort of the President, UN Secretary General, in order to encourage states to come up with how they view the application of international law in the cyberspace, these countries continues to exhibit the behavior as because of the fact that these permanent members themselves have been the perpetrators and at the same time victims of cyber attacks. So they know that if the international law development emerges in the cyber domain, so they themselves will be punished under anything which they might be formulating with other countries. So again, the first initiative was something which was not reached to a certain conclusion. After that, in 2006, Russia once again tabled as such initiative resolution at the UN General Assembly. So after that tabling of resolution in 2009, another group of governmental experts was created so that countries experts should discuss about what should be the ideal responsible state behavior. Again, no major breakthrough was able to come out of that initiative as well. But the consensus report was able to emerge, and the consensus report concluded that countries should discuss confidence building measures among themselves in order to encourage the responsible state behavior in the cyber domain. But the report in itself does not pinpoint any specific confidence building measure which states should implement or should discuss among themselves. Later on in 2012, another group of government experts was formalized. Again, this was something which made some serious headways into what should be the confidence building measures. Again, this group of government experts primarily focused on 4 aspects. They viewed how international law in its current stage, in its current form, applies to the cyber domain, and what should be the cyber confidence building measures which states should voluntarily follow in cyber domain. And capacity building measures was also agreed upon, and also the confidence and competitive measures. So these were the 4 parameters which this group of government experts discuss among themselves as to how states should have an ideal responsible state behavior. After that, they were able to reach to some conclusions that they assert this thing that states are bounded by the UN Charter with respect to their international obligation. They should continue. They should not engage in any activity which is prohibited in the physical domain, and it remains so in the cyber domain as well. So anything which is prohibited, for example, the demonstration of aggression, is same when it comes to the cyber domain. And they agreed upon this thing that proxies should not be used by any state in order to carry out cyber attacks. And similarly, territories of these countries should not be used against any other countries. So these were the three uh, points which the different participants of the group of government experts in 2012 agreed upon. And after that, major breakthrough came in 2015 when a new group of governmental experts was able to come into existence. Now, this group agreed upon 11 voluntary 11 voluntary confidence building measures among themselves, that these should be the template which states should follow. And to this very day, it remains the golden standard which highlights this fact as to what states should do in order to exhibit themselves as following a responsible state behavior. So again, some of the key ones were to not allow the use of its own territory against, again, state state A should not allow its territory to be used against state B. There should not be use of proxies. Again, no targeting of critical infrastructure. Again, the infrastructure without which a modern day nation state cannot survive should not be targeted. And again, computer emergency response teams should not be targeted. Now, computer emergency response teams are the first line of defense for any country when it comes to cyber attacks. So it was also agreed upon in this group that they should not be targeted in any way. So these 11 voluntary confidence building measures were the golden template to which to this very day. And Pakistan recently released its position paper on how it views the applicability of international law in the cyber domain. And Pakistan has agreed upon these 11 confidence building measures. And this could be a start point whenever in near future Pakistan and India might sit down and discuss as to how they should formalize confidence building measures in cyberspace. So Pakistan has, in a way, stated its position very clearly as that we are agreeing upon on these 11 cyber confidence building measures which was agreed upon in 12-15, and this should be the starting point. For Pakistan side, it is very ideal thing that they should suggest that India should come up and discuss at least on these 11 points rather than going on to discuss other things. It is important that they should at least agree to these 11 confidence building measures, and then building on those should discuss other measures as well. After that, in 2017, there was another group of governmental experts. Again, no consensus report was able to come out of this group of governmental experts because of the fact that there was geopolitical animosity between Russia and China following this revelation of how Russians was able to interfere in the 2016 presidential elections. So again, no consensus report was able to come out of the 2017. And the latest was the one in 2019, which concluded its reports in 2021. And this was the last group of governmental experts. In total, there were 6. This was the last. Again, it built upon the agreed conference building measures in 2015 and continued to reiterate those. An interesting thing happened in 2018 prior to the last group of governmental experts report was that Russia and America tabled different resolutions in front of UN General Assembly. America was of the viewpoint that this process of group of governmental experts should continue. And in 2019 group, we see another addition apart from the fact that there should be accommodating of the fact that regional balancing of participant countries and expertise of the experts who are part of this group. A third factor was included of gender balancing, that it was ensured that there should be an equal amount of gender representation in such groups. So this was the 2019 group of government experts was the first in which gender balancing was also factored in. So coming back to 2018, America proposed that this process should be continued, and it was continued in the form of the 6th group of government experts. However, Russia in 2018 come up with a new resolution where they called upon the fact that there should be an open-ended working group. So again, instead of being restricted to a handful of experts from different countries, which was around 15 to 21, at any given time, there were 21 members at the maximum in group of government experts. So they proposed that instead of continuing this process should be discontinued and a new open-ended working group should be formulated in which each member of the United Nations should have a say in the discussion of what should be the ideal responsible state behavior. And again, this was a very welcoming for a number of countries which were earlier not part of in any way, part of this discussion earlier. So it was a welcoming step for them that they were able to come up and discuss those things. So starting on from after the passing of both resolutions, there was a parallel structure of group of governmental experts and again of open-ended working group, and it shows the differences in thinking. For example, Western countries have been of this understanding that they believe that international law in its current form is as much applicable in the cyber domain as it is in the physical domain. However, countries like China and Russia believe that cyber is emerging a new domain. So again, United Nations should be taking a lead into deciding the new rules of engagement when it comes to cyberspace, and it should not be left upon the international law, which was ideally conceptualized in a time when there was no existence of cyberspace itself. And again, this difference of opinions continued to exhibit at the union level, when now there was a group of governmental experts and open-ended working group. Now, in current stage, now there is only open-ended working group which is currently functioning and will come up with its consensus report in 2025. And the process of group of government experts have been concluded. There have been 6 group of government experts as of now, and the process has been ended over there. Open-ended working groups continue to exist, where each member of the United Nations have its say on how it views. So again, coming to after giving you a brief overview of what there have been discussion on the cyberspace and how different processes have been emerged over the passage of time in order to understand what should be the ideal behavior. Again, when it comes to Pakistan and India's context, at least scholars and experts have, at least as part of my research, I've come across 14 confidence building measures which they believe can be applied in the case of Pakistan and India. The first, I will go through them one by one in order to understand how practical they are when it comes to their implementation. The first is to have a joint learning mechanism under the assistance of IEA, which is something proposed. Again, this is something which can be applicable again, but again, it is important that such discussion can be only held when there's an ideal environment for such discussions. The primary, again, if you look upon the considerable amount of work which have been done with respect to cyber confidence building is of that of Dr. Tugul Yamin, who have written and proposed, I guess, around 10 to 11 confidence building measures which he believed. And he proposed that at the time in 2014, when there was no discussion of how much cyber domain is important and how much cyber domain is important in the context of India-Pakistan rivalry. So again, at that time, he proposed a number of confidence building measures. Again, the one which he pointed out was to bring the civilian nuclear again as part of track 2 dialogue. There was also talk of having a joint task force on cyber space. Again, having a joint task force is something which have not been practiced by, again, China. When it comes to China and Russia, they does not have come up on something. The ideal thing is to have a discussion task force where both countries can discuss cyber crimes and other related threats which emanates from cyberspace. For example, the use of cyberspace by terror entities. So again, apart from that, there have been a proposal that cybercrime can be a mutual area of cooperation. Again, when it comes to cybercrime, there is a global international treaty by the name of Budapest Convention, and both Pakistan and India are not signatory to that. Again, they have their own reasons for that. But when you study the Budapest Convention, it is clear that both countries will be able to benefit. Again, the reasons which are why Pakistan and India are very different. When it comes to Pakistan, there have been this objection by our intelligence agencies that since Pakistan does not have any intelligence sharing mechanism with India, which was at that time perceived to become a member of Budapest Convention, so we are not comfortable with sharing our intelligence with India. And the fact that Budapest Convention also had Israel as a member and Pakistan does not formally recognize Israel as a state. So again, there was this apprehension by our intelligence agencies. But when it comes to India, the discussion was primarily because of the fact that the Budapest Convention demands from its signatories that there should be a harmonization of crimes. So again, for example, tampering of digital evidence in a state A, if it's a crime, it should be considered a crime in state B. So again, the dual criminality principle is something upon which the Budapest Convention sits upon. So again, India had this objections on its own internally that they have to, harmonize their domestic laws in order to become synchronized with what Budapest Convention demands. But again, when you study Budapest Convention, specifically Article 27, which talks about mutual assistance requests between states, it gives the requested party a lot of leverage as to how much evidence they are willing to share with the other party. So again, both countries can decide upon, can chalk out a study as to what type of evidence they're willing to share with other countries, in that in Pakistan and India case, among both themselves. So again, ideally both countries should become signatory and ratify Budapest Convention in near future, because it's going to be very beneficial for both countries. Moving on to other conference building which have been pointed out is again the essential services. Again, there have been lot of talk about critical infrastructure, and this is something which Pakistan in March this year also agreed that there should not be any attack on critical infrastructure. Pakistan has made it very clear its official position that Pakistan believes that critical infrastructure of other countries should not be targeted. And again, this is something which should be implemented in any future discussion with India, because this is very important not only for Pakistan and India, and for any other countries which have hostility among themselves. So this is something which the 2015 group of government experts also recommended that states should agree upon this measure, that critical infrastructure should not be targeted. And again, there is this discussion. A number of scholars have pointed out this fact that the 1988 agreement of prohibiting attacks on nuclear installation facilities should be amended by including the cyber dimension, because back in 1988 when it was introduced, there was no discussion of cyber. So again, there are a number of scholars which have pointed out that cyber dimension should be added in this 1988 nuclear agreement. Again, because of the fact that when it comes to nuclear installations, back in 1988, there was a cyber attack on one of the Indian nuclear installation, and initially Indians blame ISI for the attack. However, later technical investigation revealed that the hackers who were able to penetrate into the administrative computers of those of that particular Indian nuclear site were hackers based in America, Britain, and Australia. So again, this points out this fact that it is very important. The problem of attribution when it comes to cyber space is very important to address, and this should be pinpointed in any formal future discussion between Pakistan and India when it comes to cyber domain, that they should understand. Pakistan have made it very clear in its position paper released in March this year that the conundrum of attribution needs to be clearly addressed. As long as if it's not addressed, we are not able to pinpoint which might be a perpetrator. And there are multiple examples where a certain state have used the servers of other state in order to launch attacks against. A prominent example in this regard is of North Korean hackers, which have multiple times used Chinese servers in order to launch their attacks on American entities. So again, it is very important that attribution should be addressed in any future discussion between India and Pakistan when it comes to cyber domain. And for that, Pakistan has also suggested coordination among different countries so that they are able to pinpoint the IP addresses. IP addresses are similar to what we have our home addresses. Each digital device computer system has its own unique address. So IP addresses can be a way in order to pinpoint as to who might be the perpetrator. But again, it requires a lot of technical investigation, and this should be acknowledged in any future formal discussion between India and Pakistan. And moving on to the other fact as to propaganda. Again, this is something which have been Dr. Tugli Amin also in his publication when he conceptualized this idea of having CBMs in 2014, he highlighted this fact that there should be a mechanism in order to tame this hostile propaganda between India and Pakistan. Again, when we look upon the agreements between India and Pakistan since 1950, Nehru-Liaquat Pact, it also pointed out this fact that such hostile propaganda should be discouraged. Again, but however, there is no framework in both countries which they are able to come up with any such structure over the past 6 decades in order to how to discourage such practice. So again, in any future formal discussions, Pakistan and India can discuss such a mechanism as to how this practice should be discouraged. Again, when it comes to the cooperation between computer emergency response teams of both countries, India have its own computer emergency response team, but Pakistan unfortunately does not have its computer emergency response team. The process of setting up a computer emergency response team in Pakistan is currently in progress, but we does not know when it will be able to formalize its working operations. So again, the ability of not having a computer emergency response team is causes a number of challenges for Pakistan, because in the case where a high-profile cyber attacks happens in Pakistan, so we does not have a specific first line of defense as to how to tackle this situation, and this is one of the reasons why Pakistan have generally not been able to participate in multilateral cyber exercises all around the world, because of the fact Pakistan does not have its own national level computer emergency response team. So it is very important to Pakistan to have such team before any future discussions on cyber with India, because it will be a discouraging thing, and this is something which will go in a disadvantaged manner for Pakistan. Again, cybercrime cooperation, as I pointed out, can be a one way where both countries can agree upon because of the transnational nature of these crimes. So again, both countries should ideally ratify the Budapest Convention and should come up and work on a mechanism as to how they should treat cyber crimes and how they should prosecute such cyber criminals. Again, other measures which scholars have pointed out from time to time when it comes to India and Pakistan situation, establishment of a hotline, again, such as the one which have been proposed in the case of nuclear events. So a number of scholars have pointed out that there should be a cyber hotline between India and Pakistan. This is something which has happened in the case of America and China, and they have agreed upon on this thing that they should have this thing, and this is something which have been agreed upon by America and Russia as well, that they should have this cyber hotline apart from their nuclear hotline which they have in case of such misdirection of events in case of nuclear incidents. So they have this thing on, they should have this thing on cyber domain. So countries like America, Russia, and China does have this practice of having cyber hotline, and this should be what Pakistan should and India should also follow, that they should have a cyber hotline in order in future that such if any such thing happens, they should have this hotline in order to clarify any such misconfusion. Just to give you an example, I have given you an example of 1998, when initially India thought that Pakistan might be behind one of the attacks, but later on the technical investigation pointed out that that was launched by entirely different third parties entities, and this is something which both countries will face in future as well. So again, they need to have this apprehension that instead of instantly blaming each other, they should wait for the technical evidence and later on pinpoint evidence on a certain country. And multiple countries over the passage of time have come up with different ways of attribution. There are ways, again, most countries believe that they should not be liable to share evidence in order to pinpoint who might be the perpetrator, but again, there are legal attributions, there are other technical attributions through which countries are able to reach this conclusion as to who might be the real perpetrator behind a cyber attack. And again, the important thing is, again, one of the suggestions as part of confidence building measures is to encourage the exchange of IT students in both countries. And this is something which will be beneficial for both countries if they agree upon something, because the shared knowledge of cybersecurity will be an ideal thing. Unfortunately, when we study cybersecurity from different nations' perspective, generally we see a Western bloc led by USA, which have their own thinking when it comes to cyber security, and the other bloc is that which is led by China and Russia, which have their own thinking. So India and Pakistan have this opportunity where they can develop a new culture of cyber security, starting from South Asia and building on from there, in order to how they view cyber domain can be a source of many good things when it comes to its practically good application. And again, moving on to how, just to wind up my arguments as to how I believe in future when there should be an ideal political environment where both countries can sit down and have negotiations on cyber among other issues. The ideal is Pakistan have, by releasing its position paper on the applicability of international and cyberspace, has made its position officially clear that the starting point for Pakistan might be the 11 conference building measures which was agreed upon 2015. So that, I believe, can be a starting point for both countries, that they should agree upon this thing. But for that, Pakistan should have its also compatible response team, because one of the confidence building measures in that 2015 report was that computer emergency response teams should not be targeted. So again, Pakistan should have its team by that time so that both countries can agree upon these 11 confidence building measures and later on move to other areas or avenues where they believe. And again, cybercrime will be an important area where both countries can cooperate in near future. And for that, it is important that both countries should ratify the Budapest Convention so that they have this harmonization of criminal law in both countries and this information sharing mechanism at an international level so that they can share information among themselves about cyber criminals and other entities which might be maliciously using cyberspace for different purposes. So again, just to conclude, I believe that there should be an ideal geopolitical environment and political will on both sides in order to come up with cyber confidence building. Scholars have pointed out a number of confidence building measures. In case of India and Pakistan, there are at least 14. So these can be a starting point for Pakistan. Pakistan have made it a positive step on Pakistan side is that it has made it clear that for them the starting point can be the 11 confidence building measure, and I believe that it should be the starting point for discussion in any future dialogues on cyberspace. And I believe that cybercrime will be an important avenue of cooperation between both countries. I conclude my arguments over here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful discussion. Now let's open the floor for questions. The first question is, what are the prospects of bilateral cooperation between India and Pakistan in cyber domain? Over to you, sir.
Again, as I pointed out earlier, at its current form, there is no avenue of cooperation in near future. However, cybercrime is again the avenue where both countries can cooperate because of the fact that cybercrimes, unlike traditional crimes, have this because of the transnational nature of these crimes. This is the one avenue where both countries can participate, and for that, by ratifying the Budapest Convention, they will have this mechanism of information sharing, and it will be beneficial for that. So that can be a starting point in the near future when these countries might decide upon to have formal dialogue on cyberspace.
Okay. And furthermore, what are the challenges of cyber law in Pakistan?
Can you repeat the question?
What are the challenges of cyber law in Pakistan?
What are the challenges of
cyber law in Pakistan?
Okay. When it comes to cyber law, Pakistan currently have PECA, Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act, when it comes to how Pakistan regulate cyber crimes in Pakistan. But again, there are multiple weaknesses and loopholes which have been pointed out in the PECA itself. For example, the definition of cyber terrorism is so broad that it is weaponized against a number of people, mostly again as part of the political activism. So again, when it comes to if Pakistan in future might want to ratify the Budapest Convention, so it needs to address these loopholes and need to address a number of clauses in its PECA law or something, or a new law might be drafted in order to accommodate some of the template of the set of rules which Budapest Convention argue upon different countries that they should have these clauses, because primarily they talk about harmonization of criminal laws across all member states. They talk about dual criminality principle, wherein, for example, let's say tampering of digital evidence in country A might be a crime but might not be a crime in country B. So there should be harmonization that it should be recognized as a crime in both countries for effective implementation of Budapest Convention. So again, there is serious need of revamping PECA, and a way could be that it should be amended in order to conform with the Budapest Convention, or we should come up with a new law in order to encourage this practice. Again, the PECA talks about this fact as to entertaining international requests, but again, there is not a proper framework as it is, and Pakistan generally have been unable to come up with mutual legal assistance treaty with a number of countries. Mutual legal assistance treaties help us in order to collect evidence of cyber crimes and other related crimes. Pakistan currently has mutual legal assistance treaties with only 4 countries. Pakistan does not have a mutual legal assistance treaty with USA, which houses a number of major social media platforms, and this is one of the reasons. Unfortunately, a certain section in Pakistan, there is a certain section in Pakistan which believes that it has more to do with how India might be able to influence certain social media platforms, but we never pointed out our own internal weakness as to why, for so many years, we have failed to formalize or come up with a mutual legal assistance treaty with America. Having a mutual legal assistance treaty with America will give us instant access to the evidence which might be needed in order to prosecute cyber criminals who are perpetrating cyber crimes in Pakistan.
Okay, so the question is from Nimra Javed. The effectiveness of cyber weapons depends on secrecy. It is going to be an issue in achieving transparency. How will it impact CBMs?
Again, the nature of cyber weapons all across the world is dependent on secrecy. And a number of years back, there was this proposal by certain international scholars where they talked upon the fact that countries should be transparent about their cyber weapons, that they should discuss how much offensive capabilities they do have. But again, the proposal of having this transparency was not able to gain currency because of the fact that in an ideal situation, if America decide tomorrow to publicize its offensive cyber capabilities, no country is giving assurance to America that China or Russia might follow the same practice. So again, but when it comes to confidence building measures, there is a lot of discussion. There's not generally no discussion as to how this aspects of the secrecy surrounding these cyber capabilities should be discouraged or should be tackled. But again, when it comes to the golden standard, which the 2015 report has set upon, it does not talk about this thing, but it rather talks about the fact that critical infrastructure, again, which to a certain extent might include these capabilities, that they should not be targeted. For example, these capabilities are generally produced by military institutions, armed forces institutions. So again, the idea to not target such critical infrastructure, it will in a certain way give coverage to this thing. And so an important thing which Pakistan has failed to mention is its own national cybersecurity policy, that Pakistan failed to acknowledge the fact that its infrastructure related to armed forces also comes under the critical infrastructure. Pakistan has surprisingly omitted this understanding of having or recognizing armed forces infrastructure as critical infrastructure.
Okay, sir, this is last question from Adila Ahmed. Is setting up cyber CBMs can be more complex compared to other traditional CBMs between India and Pakistan? And what are those factors?
I guess it won't be an issue because of the fact that India, although it has not released its position paper with respect to how it views the applicability of international cyber, but it generally believes that UN Charter and other forms of international law regime is applicable in the cyber domain. So again, I does not believe that there will be issue when it comes to cyber domain, because Pakistan in March have made it clear that it believes in the implementation of the 11 CBMs which was agreed upon 2015. So that is a good thing on Pakistan side, that Pakistan has agreed. And India, whenever a future discussion might happen on these things, will be easy to acknowledge this fact, because of fact, in a way, India generally does not openly discouraged or have raised questions about these CBMs. So I does not believe that, unlike traditional CBMs, these CBMs will be much more easier to implement, because there is generally, because if we look upon these CBMs, there is nothing which these countries might not have any incentive to rather not become part of this. So I believe these CBMs will be much easier to implement and formalize as compared to traditional CBMs.
Okay, so thank you all for your insightful questions, and Mr. Nabil for your expertise. As we near the end of this Twitter Space session, I would like to invite Shehzad Akram, Research Officer at Center for International Strategic Studies, Azad Jammu and Kashmir, to share his concluded remarks. Shehzad, over to you.
Thank you, Rimsha, and thank you, Nabil, for such an enlightened lecture. Before concluding this, I would like to highlight few things. When we talk about CBM, in normal relations, there's a bit different between them, and especially when we are dealing them in cyberspace. But in cyberspace is predominantly dominated not by the action of state, but by the non-state actor. Companies and non-state actor groups are the main cyber defender, and non-state groups from especially hacktivists, organized criminals are some of the most aggressive actors. So these are the, I think, the actors which further are delayed or should make this implementation of these CBM complex rather than the normal one. So the application of these CBM apparently suitable for cyberspace. CBM must be inclusive of all the holder active in cyberspace. They must reduce risk and support trust at either building on pre-existing concept or mechanism. But I would also highlight a multi-stakeholder centric that that should also be included in this. They are, first one is talk about the collaborative CBM. These CBM are basically to bring India and Pakistan and together to solve some of the unique issues they both are dealing in cyberspace by conducting joint international or domestic investigation into the major cyber attacks that are carried out against India or Pakistan, and then the punishing the offender, and then the mechanism should be implemented in such a form that it also included the international actors, especially UN and other related bodies. And the second one I want to talk about is that focus on effective communication channel for exchange of information and during any cyber incident to minimize the damage during such incidents involve having a functional alignment of cyber crisis response team both countries should have. Then the establishment of multilateral or bilateral at least cyber hotline, and creation of attribution and adjunction council for cyber attacks. And the CBM should heavily rely on most of the time having trust between these two states. So in order to implement these CBM, these two states must create a conducive environment, and in order to deal with the common cyber related issues that both are facing. Then the specific measure that a diverse group of cyber stakeholder can implement in the next for example, there should be a time period that okay, in next 3 to 4 years this should be implemented, and then next 7 to 10 years they increase the confidence and stability in cyberspace. The multi-stakeholder centric CBM would include especially implying international law to cyber conflict by restricting target of cyber attacks and establishing neutrality status for selected sectors or the state. For example, if let's say most of those institutions which are critical or the critical infrastructure of the state should not be included, or state should not go for carried out cyber attack on these critical stuff. For example, the command and control system, the nuclear related, or those institutions which were considered as the backbone of a state. The measure should be developed through a joint declaration on common understanding of the specific international law regulation that set provision on targeting certain assets by cyber mean. One of the common example that I would like to quote here is regarding the Chicago Convention on International Civil Aviation. In this context, they talk about that prohibits any interference with computer network or system, prohibiting civil aviation safety. Then and the measure contributing to the goal of acceptance of restriction on specific targets should also be reached on the interpretation of international law and its applicability in cyberspace. Namely, what that they can be driven from law in terms of cybersecurity. Then unilaterally, state should represent and can declare that representative can declare that they consider critical infrastructure off the limit of cyber stack, that no matter what happened, state are not going to launch any cyber attack on these types of critical infrastructure. Then the engagement of neutral activist. This is one of the most complex part of CBM and adaptation of technical norms in cyberspace to support the stability of the internet. These two CBM present method to engage non-government organization to increase stability in the cyberspace and work to establish norms and standard for cyber action. This would be a grassroots environment engaging researcher, collaborating on transnational issues and leveraging all actors' skill. It would protect and support vital element of cyberspace. Further, by bringing together a diverse set of organizations, they are able to collaborate to address minor cyber incident and that helps state share information in a transparent manner. For example, if we look at the minor level of cyber incident, and most of in India Pakistan case, most of these cyber related incidents are merely related to either defacing website or DDoS type of cyber attack, in which they increase the traffic of that particular site to such a level where the user cannot connect or get information from that specific. In order to address these, the state should start from first addressing these minor issues and then go for the bigger one. Then the state should address those cyber activities that take place. The state should address a threshold or a red line, and do not constitute any normal political restriction. Then reduction tactics. These measures would create new avenue to the confidence building measure in cyber space that use a bottom up approach. Bottom approach to the norms of behavior added by the multi and bilateral state to state action and support. These CBM, each of which implemented independently, are designed to provide a diverse set of multi-stakeholders ways to increase stability and build confidence in cyberspace, so that both India and Pakistan, and despite the fact that they are already dealing with a lot of other issues, can solve or mitigate this rivalry in the cyber domain. Thank you so much. Then over to you, Rimsha.
Thank you, Shizad, for your thought-provoking concluding remarks. It has been an insightful session exploring ways to build trust and security in the cyber domain. We hope that this discussion serves as a stepping stone for further collaboration and advancement in cyber CBMs. On behalf of the Center for International Strategic Studies, AJK, I extend my gratitude to Fahad Nabil and to all our participants for their active engagement. Let us strive together to make our digital space safer and more peaceful. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.